Kia ora. Thank you so much for once again tuning in, and a welcome to my Monday evening, well, here in Melbourne it is, Monday evening live event on Facebook. It's been 2 weeks since I last came and spoke to you. Can't honestly say too much has been happening in that time, other than, well, I've managed to mess up one of my knees, haven't I? And so the MRI report said damage done, and the cure or the treatment, quiet the knee. That's the phrase, quiet the knee. So I walk around going shush knee. Actually, that just means stay off it for 6 to 8 weeks. That's not good for me. But in the meantime, I can still do things like this and other events. And that's what I've been doing primarily the past 2 weeks and will continue to do for the next several weeks ahead. And that is Zoom talks. Now, what I've been doing, well, last week and again, started again this week, Monday, primarily talking into schools. And I just love these chats that I have with students. Sometimes I'm talking to an English class, sometimes a history class, a creative writing class. I'm thankful that I'm given the heads up so that I can always just steer my talk around the subject that the students are studying. I particularly love it when I can actively engage with them and I see them leave their seat and come up to the computer and to the microphone and stick their face in front of the camera and ask me a question. All the while I can see the students in the background having a bit of a tease and a bit of laugh with them. But some of them have been just amazing, and the number of questions being asked really thrill me, because that means that well, you've either read the book and you've enjoyed it and you want to know something more, or you might think I have something to offer you in talking about how to write a novel like mine. I always feel a little bit on edge when I'm talking to an English class, and I know that there's at least one or two, maybe three teachers in the room, because often it's just not one class but multiple classes I'm being streamed into at a particular school. Now, I don't have any qualifications to teach or in any way educate. I have written so far 2 and a bit books, and so once again I think my qualifications are a bit thin on the ground. But what I can talk to these students about and what they seem to enjoy is how I get my stories and then what I do with them once I've got them. And they particularly like hearing me talk about the fact that The Tattooist of Auschwitz existed as a screenplay. And I do hope I'm not upset too many teachers by suggesting to students, well, look, if you're struggling writing a short story or a novel or anything that you're having to do in just a written format, be a memoir or whatever, that have a quick look online and see what the rules and the formula are for writing a screenplay. Have a crack at that. You might enjoy it. Particularly if you can look at a screenplay of a genre that you like, then go and watch the movie and then come back and read the script again and just see where it deviated and how it was married up. And having those 2 points of being able to look at a story, the written word and then the film, to me, I think is really, really beneficial. Now, hopefully not too many screenplays are going to turn up when students have been asked to write something a little bit more creative and to write it in a particular format. One of the things that I thought I'd talk to you about tonight, because when I mentioned it, talking to a group of students, some young girls at a college up in Sydney last week, it was a creative writing class, so I was entitled to bring the subject up. And of course, what they wanted to know was not only where I got my stories from and how I chose to write them in the way they did, but here's a couple of questions I asked, which I don't think I've been asked before, and so I had thought about them, but I was quite comfortable in coming up with answers. One of them said to me, one of the young girls, or young woman, she said to me, how do you put emotion into your stories? She said, I've been trying to write in all my creative writing and I just can't find a way of really getting the emotional connection that I want to put into the story. I thought about that for all of about 10 seconds because I know that I'd had that problem too. But what worked for me was to actually then put it into dialogue. I said, have your characters in your story have a conversation about whatever emotion it is you're trying to get through. be it love, be it hate, be it whatever, and tried doing that. And she was quite chuffed at that notion and said to me, came up for another question. So I can just say, have a conversation and just like you would in say a screenplay or in a movie. And I went, yeah, try it. By having your characters saying the words, it makes it more real, because if you've thought out your characters well enough, then you know what words they will use, and see how it plays out by writing emotion and dialogue. I come back to, I'm not qualified to give that advice, but once again, it worked for me, and that's all I can talk about. Now, one of the other young women asked me, and it occurred to me that I hadn't shared this with you. She asked me, how do you get a publisher? Well, isn't that a good question? And it was, of course, a question that I was posed with many years ago when I decided to turn The Tattooist into a novel and move away from being stubbornly holding on to that script. And, well, I think it's obvious that I've been around a decade or two or three or five or six. And for me, when I made inquiries with the one or two people who I knew who had tried to get books published, I was told it is so difficult. You get an agent. Well, I made one phone call and nobody wanted to know me. One phone call. I come back to this whole notion of the fact that time is not on my side. And then I went, well, okay, my next step surely must be in sending off an outline or a synopsis of my story to publishing houses. And so I did the right thing, and I checked on publishing houses who may be interested in publishing historical fiction, because I know for certain from all the screenplays and the competitions and the number of times I've submitted them to production companies, that you don't try and send a historical fiction story to somebody who only writes gardening books or cookbooks. You have to get to know your publisher and find the most appropriate ones to get in contact with. But then I was warned, you realise it takes months for them to get back to you. And waiting for the mail every day for what you fear will be another rejection letter was something that I thought about and went, I don't have time for this. And by time I mean, well, I'm impatient anyway. But it was more about the fact that time is moving with me. Now, one of my sons has made and continues to make short films. And I was bemoaning the fact that I was going to have to start sending letters to publishers. And by the way, he's married to this incredible lady who is an amazing author also. So he gets to not only share his life with his wife as an author, but he gets to hear about his mum and what she's writing too. But he said to me, remember a few years back, I did a crowdfunding campaign. One of the short films he was producing needed some extra funding. And so he put in a crowdfunding campaign with Kickstarter. That's Amazon's crowdfunding platform. This was many years ago. And I think he and his partner were first in the handful of Australians who had a campaign on Kickstarter in America. We know that for a fact because they were successful in raising the money that they wanted. And when Amazon told them, yes, your campaign's over, you've well and truly made the funds that you were seeking. However, you have a problem, and that is that we, in fact, can't send it to Australia. And so at that point in time, Amazon were purely only working or dealing within the United States. So there's a family, we devised a way of sending his younger brother off to America for 24 hours to use his American Social Security number because he'd worked there a few years earlier, open a bank account so his brother could get his money. But yeah, I digress. However, what he said to me was the best thing about doing this Kickstarter campaign was not necessarily the funds, though they helped immensely, but how his project became known to so many people, because the worldwide spread of Amazon's Kickstarter campaigns is phenomenal. There's not a corner of the world that they're not tapped into, they can't get access to. And he said, so why don't you do that? Well, it seemed like a nice, quick, easy way of trying to get the word out. And so I sat down in the lounge room, and the hubby got the video camera out, and we made a little short 3.5 minute video clip of me talking about Lully and the story that I had. We got online and we plagiarized the archives and got some footage of Auschwitz. And I also did plagiarize some music. Okay, I'm fessing up to that right now. I did not get permission to use this beautiful music that is in the campaign. By the way, that campaign is still there. Every now and then I go and have a look and see if Kickstarter have taken it down, and no, they haven't. Clearly, it's going to outlive me. But it worked. It worked, guys, because not only were hundreds of people getting in touch with me to say, love your campaign, love this story, you've got to find a way to be able to get the story made. And I had put it out there that it existed as a screenplay, but that I was wanting to turn it into a novel. And well, a publisher came to me. And that's how there's a brilliant editor from Echo here in Melbourne. She contacted me through Amazon, the only way she could. And she and I met, and very soon after that, I was offered the contract that led me to publishing that book and now the subsequent books. So there you go. It's another way to get your story known about. I don't know how many of you who are tuned in are writers or want to be writers and are looking for a way to be able to get your voice heard or get your project known. But can I say that what I did worked for me? I know of other people it's worked for because they have contacted me and asked for advice on how to do it. Not only have I given them advice, but one particular a friend here in Melbourne, said son, who helped me with mine, he also helped her with her Kickstarter campaign. So publishers, if any of you are tuned in, go and have a look at these crowdfunding platforms, because you never know what you might find there. The next tattooist of Auschwitz, maybe just sitting there waiting for you to come along and learn about it. Because we don't have access, by we I mean unpublished authors, we don't have access to you any other way. Yes, I know the rejection letters and the letters, that is the appropriate way, but think outside the box and try something different. And I'm delighted with the people who have contacted me, who have heard me talk about this when I've been given presentations and have said, I did it, it worked. So that is what I was able to tell these students, and I was hearing, I'm going to try that, I'm going to try that. So please do, anybody. I'm not sure that Amazon, well, they won't have a problem with it, or any of your own crowdfunding platforms in the countries that you live in. There were none in Australia when I did that, so Kickstarter and Amazon were my only source. So I just thought I'd share that with you, how I got a contract and got a publisher. And yeah, I'm pretty chuffed with it, aren't I? So this is what I've been doing, talking to schools about all manner of things, the writing, and of course, because this is what they need to know, and students need to know this, we all do, the importance of research. I've spoken about that with you in the past, so I'm not going to go through it again, but I really did hammer home the importance of research. And not just the research you do by getting on Google or even engaging professional researchers, because all the documents and all the photographs and the testimonies that you may get to help you with your story, they only form part of what will be a very, very rewarding experience for you. If you are wanting to tell a story that is based in any kind of reality, that there may be people alive today who can contribute to your knowledge, then seek them out, find them. Because it is in talking to people who are part of your story, even if it's not the story you're writing, but they were there, they know something. Find them. You're not going to find them necessarily through a professional approach. Go to your local clubs. If you're writing a story about say the Cold War, and you want to focus on the Hungarian and Soviet Union's conflict. It happened here in Melbourne at the Olympic Games, and you want to know about athletes from Hungary and how they felt about being in Australia and having to compete against their enemy who had just invaded their country, then find your local Hungarian society. Most big cities seem to have them, or Polish. Pick a nationality if that's what your story is driven from, and go there and just talk to locals, talk to the people who know. So once again, I hope that those are the tips I can give to students and to anybody that's wanting to write. Find your sources, not just the documents and the photos. As wonderful as they are, they will be just that, words on a page. And the emotion that you need to hear from somebody, you're only going to get that by talking to somebody. And boy, did I find that out, in particular with Silke, by going to Koshita and sitting in apartments of people who knew her and hearing them talk about her. That is where you get the research that gives you the emotion that young girl who wanted to know how to write it, that you can then write that dialogue or write those words. So I'm going to be doing plenty more of that. So any students that are tuned in tonight, you're going to hear all this again, but that's okay. I'll elaborate more with you. Now, the other thing I wanted to do tonight, and I was talking with my publishers in London about, hey, how are we going with Stories of Hope? What's coming through? Are stories coming through? And they went, yeah, they're coming through, and they're wonderful. And they've shared some with me. Now, one of them really, really touched me. And I asked Blake in London, can you see if I can read this story out live tonight? And the author of that story has said I can. So will you indulge me while I read you a short story that has come to us in London for Stories of Hope, for our website there. Thank you, Deirdre, for giving me permission to do this. And I'm going to have to A, put my glasses on, and B, turn away from the camera because it's on another screen here beside me. And I'm good, but I'm not that good at being able to remember every word that's written. So please bear with me and let me read you a short story written by Deirdre. And she has titled it, A Love That Lasted a Lifetime. A few years back, I struck up a conversation with one of my customers. We sat outside the office on a ledge in the sun, and I mostly listened. What an interesting man. His name is Richard, and this is what I recall from the conversation. He was born in Germany. His mother wasn't a great mother and didn't really want him. So his grandparents became his guardians when he was 4, and he lived with them in their apartment. Every Sunday his grandfather would take him to the attic and they would play with the train set. It was the highlight of Richard's week, getting to play with the trains and the special time with his grandfather. During the war there was a day when he was at school. Sirens sounded and the air raid started. When he was allowed to leave, he ran to his grandparents' apartment, only to find it in ruins. He said to me, "Do you know what my first thought was?" I said, "The train set?" "How do you know?" he asked me. And I replied, "Because you're a 10-year-old boy." His grandfather died in the bombings that day, and he found his grandmother at the hospital. She has a few scratches, but nothing life-threatening. They went to live with an aunt, and his grandmother died about a year later. Richard said that he was part of Hitler Youth. War was exciting for a young boy. He's 10, remember? What better way to get future soldiers than to mould young boys excited and ignorant about war and death? When there were air raids, once the bombing stopped, the boys would run out to see if planes had been struck down so they could get any bullets. I don't recall why, but he said they would try and get the gunpowder from the bullets, which was not always successful. Across from his aunt's apartment lived a girl a few years younger than Richard, he took an instant shine to her and brazenly said, "I will marry you one day." And when he turned 21, he did. They had a daughter, and when she was only a few years old, they decided to leave Germany and made their way to Australia to build a new life. His wife always had health problems, and that didn't improve with the move. She knew she was going to die, so sent for her sister to come live with them. She said that when she died, she wanted Richard to marry his sister because she didn't want him to be alone. Richard outlived both his wives, and he lives in a retirement home. What melted my heart was when he said that even though he slept in a single bed, he always made room in it for his wife, the first one, and said goodnight to her every night. He loved her beyond her grave, and when the time comes, beyond his. Pretty special, isn't it? That's a story from Deirdre about a man who she sat and listened to. She doesn't indicate whether she saw him again or she knows anything further about his life. But that doesn't matter. That's not what this is about. This is about a woman who chose to listen to a man, and he chose to share his story, that safety that he felt in a stranger, the safety that Lily found in talking to me, and others have found in talking to me. And please, can I say to any of you, this is an example of the kind of story that we're looking for. It's short, it's bittersweet, but doesn't it give you hope that this man, this love that he had for this woman, that he still every night says goodnight to, but more importantly, he makes room in his single bed for her. Just, beautiful story. So please, go to the website, find that submit button, write a story and send it to us. And I may get your permission to do what I've just done this evening and share it with whoever tunes into this. But just know that it's being shared to people who will appreciate it and will accept it for what it is, a beautifully told story. Stories of Hope, I think we're still on track for the book to come out. I received today, and Margaret, if you're listening to this in in London, yes, 4 boxes arrived today, and I'll open them tomorrow, okay? I know what's inside them. 6,000 pages. And on those 6,000 pages, I will write a dedication. And I will send them back to London in time for them to go to the printer to be then inserted into, I imagine, the first 6,000 books that roll off the printing press. So that is still on target, and so delighted that it will be released in September, maybe October. I haven't got an exact date yet, but when it does, you rest assured I'll be talking to you some more about it, but I will be talking to you some more anyway. I will do these events once a fortnight now. So much talking am I doing that I'm actually getting a lot of evening requests as well. And while these ones are so important to me, that I come here and engage with you live, it is also important that I also talk to these other smaller groups who ask for me to come on and share time with them. I think I've got a 4 o'clock coming up in a couple of days' time into London. And you realise that 4 o'clock, I'm talking 4 a.m. by the way, is actually a 3:30 a.m. price for me to just have that hit of coffee and make myself look presentable from the waist up, of course. Though I do so much look forward to the day that I get to dress up from the waist down as well, because that means I'm standing in front of people and talking to you in person and being able to look with you and engage with you. I love it when some of these, well, the majority of the talks I do to schools, I do have a camera and it's in the classroom, sometimes multiple classrooms, and I can see the students and I can see the ones who are listening and the ones who aren't. I wonder if they're aware that I'm actually looking at them and going, you in the back, you're not paying attention. I don't really. But in a fortnight's time, I will come back and we will talk some more. And hopefully, I will read you another story. I will let you know what else is going on in the world of, Heather Morris. Yeah, pretty weird, isn't it? Never thought I'd be doing this. Who does? For now, I wish you all stay safe, stay warm if you're down in my neck of the woods where it's getting quite chilly. We're misbehaving down here in Victoria and Melbourne, and our COVID numbers have gone up again. So I think we're going to have some more restrictions placed on us. But hey, for me, who's not allowed to leave home anyway, it's no big deal. And thankfully, I have a family who can keep me supplied in the necessary food and liquid. And I have my 6,000 pages to sign, plus other assorted goodies. Thank you for coming in this evening. If any of you have sent any questions online, I can see that the chat's there. I will go and answer them. Oh, I meant to say that I think there may be some I missed last week. I disconnected too soon and then I couldn't go back and find them. I told you before I'm not techie. I need to keep repeating this. But I will try better this evening to now go and answer any questions that have come my way. Thank you. Good evening. Good morning. And I'll talk again in a couple of weeks' time. Good night.